Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're kicking off another deep dive. And you know how much we love to unpack these thought-provoking topics. And this one is all about solitude and loneliness.
Ooh, that's a good one.
I know, right? We found this really insightful video all about it, and I have to say, I was surprised by how much it shifted my perspective. It dives into the differences between the two, especially for women.
Yeah, it's interesting how those two get kind of lumped together, right?
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're going to explore. We're going to dig into what makes them distinct, why that matters, and how embracing solitude can actually be really empowering. And stick with us because you might be surprised by just how beneficial solitude can be. So, I guess to kick things off, let's just dive right in and address that big question. What's the difference between solitude and loneliness? I mean, they seem similar on the surface, but clearly there's more to it.
Definitely. I think a lot of people struggle with that distinction. It's not just semantics. There's a real difference in the experience.
So, break it down for us. What makes them so distinct?
Well, loneliness is that feeling of emptiness, like you're surrounded by people, but you still feel isolated and disconnected.
Ugh, yeah, like being lost in a crowd.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're yearning for connection, but you just can't find it. Whereas solitude, on the other hand, is about making a conscious choice to be alone.
So it's intentional. It's almost like creating space for yourself.
Exactly. It's about embracing that time alone and using it in a way that nourishes you. The video really emphasizes this point and even uses a great analogy. It says loneliness is like being lost at a crowded party, while solitude is like curling up with a good book and a cup of tea.
Okay, I love that analogy. Same physical state, totally different experience. And this video really zeroes in on why this is especially important for women.
Yeah, and that's a really important point to highlight. Women are often expected to be the caregivers, to be constantly available for everyone else,
Always putting others first.
right? And while that's a beautiful quality, it can also lead to burnout and a loss of self if it's not balanced.
It's like running a marathon with no finish line. You hit a wall eventually. And it sounds like the video suggests that solitude can be a way for women to reclaim their time and energy, almost like hitting a pause button to find themselves again.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that taking time for yourself isn't selfish. In fact, it's an act of self-care that allows you to show up more fully in all areas of your life. And the video takes it a step further by outlining 5 key benefits of solitude, specifically for women.
Ooh, a list. I love lists. Let's
Those-
hear it. What are those magical benefits?
Well, the first one is rediscovering your self-identity.
Interesting. How does solitude help with that?
Think about it. When you step away from the noise and expectations of everyday life, you create a space to reconnect with yourself. You get to rediscover your passions, your interests, your values. Those things that make you, well, you.
I think we've all had those moments where we feel like we've lost sight of ourselves a little bit. We get so caught up in all the roles we play, mother, daughter, employee, partner.
Exactly. We get defined by these external labels. But in those moments of solitude, we can shed those labels and remember who we are at our core.
It's like a reset button, right? You get
Yeah.
to reconnect with that authentic self that might have gotten a little buried under the weight of expectations.
Exactly. And you might be surprised by what you rediscover. Maybe a forgotten hobby, a passion project you put on hold, or simply a deeper understanding of what truly matters to you.
That's so powerful. And it makes me think about the second benefit the video highlights, emotional resilience.
Yeah, that's a big one. Solitude can be a powerful tool for building emotional strength.
Okay, so explain that connection for us because at first glance, it doesn't seem obvious.
So when you're alone, you have the space to actually process your emotions without distractions.
Hmm.
You can sit with those uncomfortable feelings, work through challenges, and develop healthy coping mechanisms that aren't dependent on external validation.
It's about building that inner strength. You learn to self-soothe, to regulate your emotions, and to approach challenges with more calm and clarity. So it's not about avoiding those difficult feelings, it's about learning how to navigate them.
You got it. It's like building a strong internal foundation that can weather any storm.
I love that. So what's the next benefit on this list? I'm really intrigued to hear what else solitude has to offer.
This one might resonate with a lot of people, especially women. It's all about nurturing self-love and confidence.
Okay, now that's something I think we could all use a little more of. It's so easy to get caught up in comparisons and external judgments. We're constantly bombarded with messages about how we should look, act, and be.
It's exhausting,
Hmm.
and it can really chip away at our self-esteem. But that's where solitude comes in. It gives us a chance to step away from all those external pressures and reconnect with ourselves.
Mm.
It's about taking the time to appreciate ourselves, to celebrate our strengths, and to learn to accept those parts of ourselves that we might perceive as flaws.
It's about recognizing that we're worthy of love and acceptance just as we are. And you know what? That kind of self-acceptance can be incredibly liberating.
Absolutely. It's about shifting our focus from seeking validation outside of ourselves to finding it within.
It's like stepping into your own power.
Exactly. And as you cultivate that sense of self-love, it naturally spills over into greater confidence.
Hmm.
You start to show up in the world with more authenticity and assurance because you're no longer looking for approval, you're drawing it from within.
I love that. So what else is on this list of amazing benefits? What's next?
Well, this one might surprise you. It's about enhancing creativity and intuition.
Really, I've always thought of creativity as something that comes from collaboration and brainstorming, bouncing ideas off of other people. I never really associated it with being alone.
That's a common misconception, but think about it. When you're constantly bombarded with information and stimulation, it's hard for those creative sparks to ignite. But when you create space for quiet reflection, those sparks have room to catch fire.
So it's like giving your mind permission to wander and explore without any constraints.
Precisely. You're giving yourself the freedom to make new connections and to tap into those deeper wells of creativity.
That makes sense. And it connects to the idea of intuition as well.
Right, exactly.
Right.
When you're not distracted by all that external noise, you can tune into your inner voice, that gut feeling that often guides us towards the right decisions.
So it's about quieting the mind and really listening to that inner wisdom. Okay, so what's the final benefit the video highlights?
This one is all about developing independence and freedom. Choosing solitude is choosing yourself. It's a way of saying, hey, I'm complete on my own. I don't need constant external validation or company to feel fulfilled.
It's about owning your own happiness.
Yes, and that sense of independence can be incredibly liberating, especially for women who might have been conditioned to put others first. It's about setting boundaries, pursuing your own passions, and living life on your own terms.
It's powerful. And you know what? It really reframes the idea of being alone. It's not about isolation or rejection. It's about recognizing that we have the power to create our own happiness and fulfillment.
I completely agree. The video really drives home the point that solitude isn't about rejecting connection. It's about building a stronger foundation for deeper, more meaningful connections,
Hmm.
both with ourselves and with others.
Because when you're grounded in your own sense of self, you can approach relationships with more authenticity and depth. I
Sure.
really love that perspective. It's not solitude versus connection, it's solitude for connection.
You got it. So are you ready to move on to the practical side of things?
Hmm.
Because the video doesn't stop at just listing the benefits of solitude. It also provides some really tangible tips on how to actually embrace solitude in our daily lives.
Yes, please. I think that's where it gets really interesting for our listeners. How do we take this from theory to practice? What are some actionable steps we can start taking today to invite more solitude into our lives?
Well, the video starts by acknowledging that it's one thing to understand the concept of solitude, but it's another thing entirely to actually put it into practice.
Right. It's like, okay, we get it. Solitude is good for us. But with our busy lives and all the distractions, how do we actually make it happen?
Exactly. And the video suggests starting small. Don't feel like you need to go on a silent retreat right away. Just start by scheduling small pockets of alone time into your week.
Okay, so like what? Give me an example.
It could be as simple as taking a 15-minute walk in the park without your phone, or having a quiet cup of coffee before everyone else wakes up, or maybe carving out an hour on Sunday morning for journaling.
Just those little moments throughout the week to disconnect and recharge.
Exactly. The key is to make it intentional, to actively create those moments instead of waiting for them to magically appear.
So once you've carved out that time, what's the best way to use it?
The video recommends filling that time with activities that truly nourish your soul.
Okay, so what kind of activities are we talking about here?
Well, it really depends on what brings you joy and allows you to reconnect with yourself. It could be anything from journaling and meditation to spending time in nature,
Those are always good.
right? Or you could try reading, listening to music, creating art, maybe even just giving yourself permission to daydream for a bit. The key is to choose activities that help you disconnect from the outside world and tune into your inner world.
It's like giving yourself permission to just be without any expectations or agenda.
Precisely. And speaking of disconnecting, The video also really emphasizes the importance of digital detoxes.
Okay, now that's a tough one for a lot of us. Our phones are like extensions of our hands these
I
days.
know it can be challenging, but even taking small breaks from technology can be incredibly restorative.
So, what are some strategies for actually pulling off a digital detox?
Well, the video recommends starting small. Maybe try putting your phone away for an hour each evening,
I can do that.
or designate one day a week as tech-free. The point is to create some distance between you and your devices.
So, it's not about becoming a technophobe, it's about finding a healthier balance.
Exactly. You want to be in control of your technology, not the other way around.
That's a great point. And as we're talking about all of these practical tips, it strikes me that embracing solitude isn't about becoming a hermit and shutting out the world completely. It's about making a conscious choice to create space for yourself amidst the busyness of life.
Exactly. And that brings us back to a really crucial point the video makes about challenging those societal expectations around solitude, particularly for women.
It's like there's this unspoken pressure to always be connected, to be the social butterfly, to always have plans. If you choose to stay in on a Friday night, you might get some strange looks.
Right. Like you're missing out on something.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's where the video really challenges us to question those norms and to reframe our understanding of what it means to be alone.
Because choosing solitude isn't a sign of weakness or social awkwardness.
It's about self-awareness.
Right. It's about knowing yourself, knowing what you need, and prioritizing your well-being.
And recognizing that you don't need constant external validation to feel happy and fulfilled. As we're talking about this, I'm remembering a quote from the video that really resonated with me. It said, "Solitude is not a punishment or a sign of being disconnected. On the contrary, it is a time to cultivate self-awareness, resilience, and peace."
Ooh, I like that.
I know, right? And it really speaks to this idea of reframing solitude as a positive choice.
And challenging those ingrained beliefs that we have about being alone. It makes you think, how do I really feel when I'm by myself? Do I experience it as peaceful and rejuvenating, or do I get antsy and restless?
I think a lot of people would be surprised by their own answers. And if you do find yourself struggling with those negative feelings, the video encourages you to dig a little deeper.
Yeah, explore what's going on there. Like what thoughts or beliefs might be driving that sense of loneliness?
And journaling can be a really great tool for that kind of self-reflection.
Definitely. And it's also important to be mindful of the messages we receive from society, from the media, from our social circles. Are those messages reinforcing a fear of being alone? Are they making us think that solitude equals loneliness?
It's about becoming aware of those external influences and then choosing whether or not to buy into them.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming your own narrative.
So it's about taking back control, right?
Yeah.
Shifting the perspective from viewing solitude as something to be avoided to seeing it as a valuable opportunity for growth and self-discovery.
It's an investment in yourself.
And I love how the video emphasizes that. It encourages us to reframe solitude not as deprivation, but as a gift. It's like giving yourself the gift of time and space, the freedom to just be.
And when you make that shift, the dread might start to melt away and be replaced by a sense of anticipation. You start to choose solitude instead of enduring it.
Yeah, you start to crave those moments of peace and quiet.
Exactly. And you know what? The video even suggests actively cultivating a positive relationship with solitude.
So how do we do that? How do we make solitude something we actually enjoy rather than something we just tolerate?
It's about creating rituals and practices that make you feel good when you're alone.
So like giving yourself something to look forward to during those moments of solitude.
Exactly. Maybe you start a morning routine with a quiet cup of coffee and journaling, or a Sunday evening ritual of a long bath and a good book.
Make it special.
Right. The key is to start associating solitude with positive experiences, so it becomes something you crave instead of something you dread.
That makes a lot of sense. And it's a good reminder that embracing solitude doesn't mean shutting yourself off from the world or becoming a recluse.
Definitely not. It's about finding that sweet spot, that healthy balance between connection and solitude.
It's about being intentional with how you spend your time and energy and choosing to spend some of that time in the company of, well, yourself.
You said it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that leads us beautifully into the final message of the video, which is all about celebrating solitude as a source of strength, especially for women.
It feels like the video really drives its point home in this section.
Yeah, it really does. It talks about how in a culture that constantly glorifies busyness and social engagement, choosing solitude can be a really radical act.
It's like we're programmed to think that being busy equals being successful and happy.
Exactly. Like if you're not constantly on the go, you're somehow falling behind.
And that pressure can be especially intense for women. It's like we're conditioned to put everyone else's needs before our own. So to actually step back and say, hey, I need some time for myself, it almost feels rebellious in a way.
It's like you're going against the grain. And that's where the video really challenges us to break free from those expectations.
To reclaim our right to solitude.
Exactly. To recognize that taking time for yourself isn't selfish, it's essential. It's an act of self-care and self-preservation.
And it's setting a powerful example for others.
Oh, absolutely. Especially for younger generations, we're showing them that it's okay to be alone, to prioritize their own needs, and that solitude can actually be a source of strength.
It's like we're giving them permission to be themselves, to embrace their own individuality.
Yes. And the video uses this great analogy to illustrate that point.
Oh, tell me about it. I love a good analogy.
It compares us to a tree. A tree needs strong roots to grow tall and strong.
Of course, that's its foundation.
Well, in the same way, we need a strong foundation of self-awareness and self-care to really thrive. And solitude provides that fertile ground for those roots to grow deep. It's in those quiet moments that we connect with our core values, our passions, our dreams.
And it's from that place of groundedness that we can then branch out into the world with more confidence, resilience, and purpose. I love that. It's like solitude allows us to nourish ourselves so that we can then nourish the world around us.
Beautifully put. And, the video ends with this really powerful call to action.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
It basically says, hey, women, celebrate your solitude. Own it.
Don't let anyone make you feel ashamed of it.
Exactly. It's not something to hide or apologize for. It's a source of strength, creativity, and renewal. It's a gift.
And I think that's a beautiful note to end on. Choosing solitude is choosing yourself, and that is one of the most empowering decisions you can make. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I just want to leave our listeners with this question. How can you reframe your relationship with solitude and use it as a tool for personal growth and empowerment? What steps can you take today to create those pockets of peace in your life?
And remember, solitude looks different for everyone. There's no one-size-fits-all approach. The key is to experiment and discover what works best for you, what brings you that sense of peace and rejuvenation. It might be a daily meditation practice, a weekend hike, or even just 15 minutes at night to read a book and unwind.
Whatever it is, the important thing is to make that time for yourself, to honor your needs and to listen to your inner voice. It's about recognizing that solitude is not a punishment, it's a privilege.
And it's not a destination, it's a journey.
It's an ongoing practice of self-discovery, of deepening that connection with yourself and creating a more authentic and fulfilling life.
That's what it's all about.
Well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap up.
I agree.
Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive into the world of solitude and loneliness.
It's been a pleasure.
And to all our listeners out there, keep diving deep. We'll catch you on the next one.